So back in June of 2021, I posted a video requesting questions for a two-part Q&A series. We're going to be doing part 1 of that series today. So if you had questions on metal or metal vinyl collecting, or even some personal questions for me, you came to the right place. So, of course, some of you are probably already noticing that I'm in a different shooting location. Typically, I'm either on the couch or I'm in front of the records, but today I'm in front of my edit suite. I am doing a little bit of editing later today, so it kind of makes sense. But also, this is where I'm going to be doing the proposed live stream from. So for those who are interested in that, I'm going to be talking about that at the end of this video. I'll be going into much more depth about it at the end of part 2. So this is basically what I'm going to be looking at when I do my live stream. So a little glimpse to that and a little bit of my process as well. So anyways, let's get to the questions. The first question is from Jamie. He writes, best live show you've seen? I know I've talked about this before in a separate video. I know I also talked about this for my patrons. I did an audio podcast of sorts on this very show, but I feel like I should talk about it now. It's obviously Slayer, 1986, the Rain and Blood tour. And the funny thing about that show was that I didn't think I was going to get to go initially. I thought it was sold out. And then what happened is that a buddy of mine, I was managing his band. He was a drummer in a band I was managing. His name is Den. He had 2 tickets to it when everyone else couldn't get tickets to the show at all. And none of my other friends got tickets. And it was funny because I was like going around saying, are you going to the Slayer show? This is amazing. And they're like, no, I couldn't get tickets, or I'm broke, or I'm working, or whatever. So Den and I were the only 2 people we knew who went to the Slayer show at all. Like none of our friends did otherwise. So the thing about the ticket was that Den was going to sell me the ticket, but the catch was that I had to get us a ride to and from the show because we were living in Worcester and the show was in Boston, which is about almost an hour away, and he didn't have a car. So I had to go to my grandmother for this. And it was a bit of a hard sell because my grandmother wasn't exactly excited about the music I was listening to in the 1980s. Perhaps some of you have that same story with a parent. My grandma was kind of parent adjacent. She raised me for some of my childhood. My mother raised me for the rest. So I went to her and petitioned for my cause to go to the Slayer show. And I remember it started with, "You don't understand, Grandma. This is Slayer. This is Rain and Blood. This is the greatest heavy metal album ever made. I'm going to be talking about this album for decades to come," which of course is true. Right now I'm talking about it. And so somehow, I don't know if it was just empathy or she loved her grandson a whole lot, but she relented and she said, okay. So we got in the car for the night of the show and we went all the way to Boston. And I should explain where the show was. It was at the Channel. The Channel was a club. It doesn't exist anymore. It was torn down in the 90s, I think the mid-90s or thereabouts. It's a pretty cool club. It was kind of small. Wikipedia says there are 1,400 people capacity. I don't buy that at all. I think you could pack about 700 or 800 in there and then stop. The club was infamous. It was mob. It had mob ties. I should explain that. There was a little bit of mob money floating in there. There's a whole story about that, by the way, if you're interested in this club you've never been to, basically. There's a podcast called Boston Venue, the Channel podcast, which tells the whole story of the Channel. It's a pretty cool club. Again, it's got the mob ties. There was a murder involved with it. It's an interesting little club for when it existed. It's in a really sketchy neighborhood near South Station in Boston, but a great club. So that's just a background on the venue there. So we went, and Den and I were really excited. We went into the venue, and my grandmother basically waited in the parking lot the whole time. She must have read her tabloid magazines in the car with a little roof light on while metalheads are running around drunk and screaming in the parking lot and tailgating. So that must have been interesting for her. I don't know. She and I had never really talked about that. She's still alive, by the way. She's going to be 99 years old soon, which is just amazing. My last grandparent. But anyways, so Dee and I went to the show. And Wargasm was the first band. They were a Boston band, thrash band. I didn't really appreciate them back then. I've listened to them now a little bit. I kind of like them a little bit more now, but I wasn't there for them. After that was Overkill. Overkill was still touring Feel the Fire. I was really excited about Overkill. They're one of my favorite thrash metal bands of all time. Still feel that way. So they did, I think, almost the entire Feel the Fire album because that's all they had out. And I know they did a couple cover songs, some of the more infamous covers, of course. Really cool. Dee Dee Verney is one of my bass heroes, so I was definitely excited to see him performing live as well. Just an amazing show. So Slayer came on next. I can't tell you how amazing it is to have seen Slayer in a club, because soon after that they were doing larger venues, and then they were going out with bigger bands after that. So pretty cool to see Slayer in a live setting in a club. I must have been no more than 5 feet away from Kerry King and a very large stack of Marshall amps. In fact, so close that my ears rang for 7 days straight. But I wasn't moving. I mean, I was like, holy crap, this is Slayer, and I'm here with them. So it's pretty cool. They played the entire Rain and Blood album. They played most of Hell Awaits. I don't know what song. I think it may have been one song they skipped from Hell Awaits. And then some of the more classic stuff from Show No Mercy and a couple tracks from Haunting the Chapel. So it was a very full set. It was a long show. Pretty cool. So end of the show, we were very psyched. Dee and I just kept talking about it in the back of the car. My grandmother probably just putting up with that. And I remember we held it over the heads of our friends for months, years, let's be honest, years to come. I still do. I'm like, you know that show you missed? You know, of that amazing Slayer album? Well, you know, I went to it, you know. So that's kind of fun. So that's probably the greatest show I ever went to, the one I really remember and really excited about, even still, obviously. There were other cool shows I went to, even later on. I remember seeing Dio in 2002, and what was cool about that was that it was a club show. So seeing Dio in a club was amazing. I thought that would never happen. I also remember Voivod opened the show. This was in Montreal. I can't remember. I think it was at the Medley. I don't think the Medley's around anymore. I can't recall. But we didn't know Voivod was going to come on. It was really funny. We're in the crowd, and the lights dim, and we start hearing the intro to The Unknown Knows, which I thought was just music over the PA. So I'm still talking to my buddy like, oh, you know, we had some time with the show. And all of a sudden, the song kicks in, and the lights come up, and Snake grabs the mic and just starts singing at the crowd. And we both swung our heads around going, holy crap, it's Voivod. So that was a nice surprise, especially since I've never seen Voivod. I got screwed for a ride for the Dimension Hatros tour way back, so it was nice to finally see them. I saw other bands, of course, a litany of bands, especially in the 80s and early 90s. It was Nuclear Assault, there was Wrathchild America, there was Corner and Creator, and tons more bands. A Bolt Thrower, amazing show, also at the channel. So those are some other shows that I was pretty excited about, but yeah, if I've got to pick one, it's got to be that Slayer show. And I'm still talking about it. Obviously, I'm telling you. So there you go. So next question is from Stan. He writes, were you ever on the Brave Board Metal Forum? And if so, what was your name? Well, the answer is no. I've never been really huge with message boards, especially nowadays, because I feel social media takes over a lot of that. I did initially plug this channel at Metal Forums way back, but I wasn't getting a lot of response. Maybe some of that was because, well, most people go to social media for that kind of stuff, but also because I was very new at the time. And I kind of just gave up promoting there because I wasn't getting much in the way of feedback. But so yeah, I used to enjoy message boards way the hell back, maybe in the early aughts, and maybe even in the 90s to some extent, but I just don't go there anymore. I know Metal Archives, I think, had a forum that I used to go to. I don't go there anymore. So yeah, so that's my answer. Getting to the next question, Robert writes, hey, I like synth music, being a Carpenter fan and soundtracks, but I know nothing about Witch House music and kind of confused. Is Witch House a group or a genre? Can someone help point me in a direction? Well, I don't listen to Witch House. It is a genre, but not for me, and I don't think it's anywhere near metal in a lot of ways. Someone in the comments could help this guy out. He might appreciate it, but I have no answer for this. So Chris writes, I am currently 48 years old, and I'm still listening to thrash. I listen to all kinds of other genres too, but I thought I'd be listening to Glenn Miller by now, if you see what I'm getting at. Perhaps we may look a little strange in the retirement home. What are your thoughts on aging metalheads? Thanks. Well, Chris, since I'm an aging metalhead myself, I guess I come from that experience. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I don't know if I ever thought about listening to softer music in my older age. Maybe. A lot of us grew up with heavy metal, but we also grew up with some of the pop music at the time, especially before we discovered metal. I'm not sure if the elderly me will go more back towards that kind of music. For me, that's more the pop of the late 70s and the early 80s, a lot of the radio rock stuff. I'm thinking Cheap Trick and Pat Benatar and some other things like that. Maybe I'll listen to that, but I can't see why we still wouldn't listen to the music we love. It is our generation's music, and that includes bands like Slayer and early Metallica or later Metallica. I don't know. Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. So you know what? The retirement home is just going to have to get used to our blasting of crazy music. So the Death Doom Metalhead writes, do you notice a lot of the older collectors find it hard to accept newer bands into their lives? And do you find that sometimes when checking out new music that you compare it to something it reminds you of and then dismiss it? I think there is some truth here. Definitely. I know a lot of people my age who are very reluctant to discover new metal. Very, very opposed to it. I think a lot of that, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this towards the end because I have a very similar question coming up. But yeah, I love the older stuff. I love the newer stuff, so I'm really not in that group, but I definitely have a lot of friends who are, and I'll bring a new band to them, and they'll be like, no, I'm not listening to that. That's, no. And I'll get into why that is later when the other similar question comes up. But comparing it to something it reminds you of, yeah, I've done that. I mean, I do that in some of my videos, too. This sounds like this. That's going to happen. But dismissing it, not really, because usually I can find the elements in a band that are different from that, or they'll take that influence and do something new and exciting with it. And so I try to keep an open mind to that, and I would hope other older metal fans would also do that. Many of them are not going to do that. They're going to be stubborn and resistant, but maybe some of my videos, maybe because I'm an older guy and I'm doing these videos, maybe some of them will look at my videos and go, okay, maybe I will give these bands a chance. Hopefully. We'll see. So Brian writes, do you think there will reach a point where vinyl prices will either drop, or could vinyl prices kill vinyl when the nostalgia for CDs reinvigorates affordable physical media? It's an interesting question. That involves speculation quite a bit. I don't know how far into the future I can see, but prices dropping, I don't know if I'm really an optimist about that, because records are expensive. Especially here in North America, I feel like you Europeans get the better deals. I'm always hearing you talk about records being like 5, 10, 15 pounds, and I'm like, lucky you, because that's not what we're getting. I mean, unless you're buying from overseas. Locally, yeah, we're still paying, $25, $30, $35 for records, which is a little crazy. So I understand the temptation to go back to CDs. I've heard people in the vinyl community talking about that a little bit. Prices kill vinyl. I don't know if they'll kill vinyl. I think there's still a very loyal vinyl following. I'm still on board. If I want an album, I'm going to pay the price for it. And I think there are others like me. How many of us there are could be up for debate. So I obviously don't have an answer for this. I'm floundering a little bit because, again, I don't know the future. But I would hope the prices would drop. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, CDs are coming back too in an interesting way. And a lot of people are going back to CDs. I mean, CDs are cheaper. I get it. But, those of us who love vinyl, love the sound of vinyl. We love the larger artwork and the experience of holding that in our hands and all of that. So that's why we don't necessarily go digital and maybe or maybe not go CD. So I don't know. That's what I've got. Jake890 writes, you buy vinyl because you prefer listening to the music in this format, or do you do it for the sake of collecting? Well, I would hope most people are doing it for the former. I know there are people who just collect. They're probably flippers. I would assume they're wanting to sell off the collection later in life. I may have to do that because I'm not going to live forever. Maybe in my 80s or 90s I'll do that, but there's no way I'm doing that now. I enjoy the format. I mean, I pretty much started on the format when I was 13 years old, and I bought that first record, which I'll talk about later, maybe in part 2, I believe. I can't remember who asked the question, but maybe it's later. I got to look. But yeah, I love vinyl. I love the warmth of it. I love everything about it. I love the physical act of putting the needle in the groove. I love holding the big artwork, as I mentioned before. So yeah, for me, it's about the experience and the sound and all of that. And yeah, I love the music, and I love it on vinyl. And I feel fortunate that music's being pressed to vinyl again after so many years of it not being pressed to vinyl. So yeah, And I don't miss CDs at all. I know people love that format and, God love you, but I'm just not that guy. CDs are just meh. CDs are a compromise to me. It's all about vinyl. Hellgrinder writes, how long have you been collecting? Roughly how many items do you have in your collection? What are your favorite findings? And what do you think about ranch dressing? Well, Hellgrinder, that's a lot of questions, isn't it? Let's start with the first. How long have you been collecting? I've been collecting since 1980. I was 12 years old. I got my first record, my first real LP that I actually paid my own money for. That would be the Flash Gordon soundtrack. I've talked about that before. Kept collecting until about the mid-1990s when a lot of us jumped to CDs, or only CDs at that point. And then I didn't pick it up again until the early 2010s. So two-part answer there for you. Roughly how many items do I have in my collection? At last count, I have 928, I believe, getting closer to 1,000 records. In fact, if you'd like to see a video on my 1,000th record, maybe I'll do a sort of solo review of that just one record. Let me know in the comments. That'll be a good time, probably. What are your favorite findings? I'm going to talk about a full list of this later because someone asked a very similar question, but obviously that Overkill EP, that's super roughly hard to find at a good price. I love that. I love my Megaforce Kill 'Em All from Metallica. I have a lot of favorites, but those two are on the list. I'll mention the others when the other similar question comes up. And what do I think about ranch dressing? I used to like it, but I'm on a ketogenic diet. I've been doing that for over 3 years now. And ranch has a surprising amount of corn syrup in it. You would never think, but it does most of the time. So I inadvertently avoid ranch dressing. I don't know if I miss it so much, but I mean, the only thing I really had it with were wings. So still have the wings, dry rub now instead of sauce ones. But yeah, so there's my exciting answer to that question. Ronald writes, what is the meaning behind the tattoos on your forearms? Also, most essential/favorite Nawabum release. Let's talk about the tattoos. Make some room for them. It's these two. I have many more than this. These are the only visible ones. Obviously an Apple logo, and this one's probably a bit more of a mystery. Let's talk about this one first. It is the logo for my one-man media company I started back in 1993 called Purging Talon. In fact, I just killed the website to it recently because I'm not doing too much under that name. I'm doing a lot more with the Accusation network, clearly. But back then, I did zines throughout the 90s. I did some public access television. I did some writing for other people. I did internet radio. I did podcasting. I did a whole bunch of stuff. I did some music project stuff, too, that no one ever heard or saw. I never really completed it anyways. And then other bands came along doing much better stuff along those lines, so I just gave up. But yeah, so that's that tattoo. It's a reminder, a very cool part of my media production life. I cherish those memories greatly. They led me to this, so I'm pretty excited about that even to this day. I also have a couple books out. You can Google those under my name. Go to Amazon. They're there. They may or may not be of the subject matter you're interested in. I guess you'll find that out when you Google. So there you go. As for the Apple tattoo, right there, I got this on the 25th anniversary of the Macintosh, very specifically. I'm that much of a nerd. I've been interested in Apple computers since 1983 when I started on an Apple IIe at the high school I was at. This time it was Park City, Utah. A fairly wealthy school, so they had a computer lab in 1983, which a lot of schools did not. And it was all Apple IIes. I think there might have been some 2Cs as well. But I started on that. I had those big floppy disks and playing Lemonade Stand and the Oregon Trail and all that kind of stuff. I was 15 years old at the time. This is sophomore year of high school. And then I couldn't afford my own Mac when the Macintoshes came out. They were very expensive. So I might remember they were $2,500 for the original model. And that was in 1984's money. But, in the intervening years, there were computer labs at universities and stuff. So I would be on those. I got my first Mac in 1993. I actually won it in a contest. It was a Mac Classic. Started doing my desktop publishing. That's where the zines come in. So I didn't do a lot of cut and paste stuff. I actually could do it on a computer, and I later bought a scanner and all that stuff. So that got my ball rolling into media. So Macs have been ever present in my media production. My media production has been rather important to me. So by proxy, so have Apple machines and Apple hardware and Apple software too. In fact, we've got some Apple software running right there in the background as well. So I do video as well on it. Doing video on that prompted me to go get a bachelor's degree in communication with a concentration in video production. It also made me want to do public access television, which I did for over a decade. So a lot keeps going back to Apple and Apple hardware and software. So I grew to love that platform. So I got the tattoo. And I know that Apple logo signifies a lot of other things in modern day. I know that some people associate some certain politics that are a thing in Silicon Valley in general. I don't subscribe to much of those politics, and I don't want to get into politics too much here. But so for me, it doesn't represent that at all. It also doesn't represent sort of the sort of hip, trendy popularity of Apple now. I didn't get the tattoo then, and my interest in Apple didn't start there or even go there. So in case anyone needs that long, involved explanation on how I view my Apple tattoo, there it is. Oh, and also the favorite Essential Nawabum album. Let's get to that. That's tough. I don't know if it's necessarily like choosing one of your children, because I do love the new wave of British heavy metal. I was really late to the game of that, actually. I discovered, well, we can talk about Venom. I feel that they're no more Nawabum adjacent. If you saw my Nawabum special, you know that. Raven, probably my first technically new wave of British heavy metal band, when I got live at the Inferno. Started with a live album, great live album, one of my very favorites, by the way. Yeah, and then later I got into Angel Witch, and much later Diamond Head, and then that comp came out, that 79 revisited comp that Lars Ulrich and Jeff Barton put out in the early 90s. That got me into the rest of the bands. So I was a little late to the game, in a sense, but I love the genre dearly to this day. Favorite album, it's an album I don't have on vinyl, unfortunately. I do have it on CD. I've had it probably since about 1980, late 80s, I'd say, is definitely that first Angel Witch album, that 1980 self-titled debut. I love that album. I can play that album front to back to this day. Love that album dearly. I love the live in studio music video. You can look that up on YouTube. I love that. And yeah, so Angel Witch with Angel Witch by Angel Witch. I love that. Anyways, there you go. Martian Spy writes, what were the circumstances that initially made you cut off the long hair? That was a while ago, actually. I did have my hair chopped off in probably the fall of 1992. I've probably been trying to grow it since, I'd say 1984, 85, thereabouts. A number of things, actually. I did have it all chopped off. I went straight to this, which is interesting. I had a girl do it, a girl I was sleeping with at the time, who was quite in love with my hair, and she cried while she did it, which was fun, I guess, back then anyways. Yeah, it was 1992, things were changing. I was kind of bored with my hair at the time, to be honest, and I really didn't have a desire to grow it back all the way up until maybe about 5 years ago. I actually did attempt to grow it back. I spent 2 years growing it out, and it just looked awful. It was clear that a man in his 50s has a very different amount of hair on his head than a man in his teens or 20s. And I found that out perhaps the hard way. It came out really stringy and very sparse. My hair was really fine. The slightest breeze would blow all of it into the air when no one else's hair is even moving. So yeah, it just looked awful and stringy and horrible. I looked like a irradiated victim of some sort. So I chopped that off again. I was like, you know what? Maybe it's time to give up on that idea. But yeah, to those of you who have great hair, good on you. But I just wasn't born with that. Thank God I'm not bald, though. My dad went bald at 19, so at 52, I still have this, which is great. Yeah, so there it is. Diabolic771 writes, do you ever purge items from your collection from getting just too out of hand? What is your criteria? I hardly ever get rid of records. I'm a bit of a hoarder in that regard. Not about other things, but about my vinyl collection in general. I'll hang on to stuff for the longest time, even if I don't really listen to it all that much. I did get rid of some records, some promotional records I got that I don't listen to very much. A few of those might have made it into my 2000 subs contest. So there's that. My criteria, if I were to get rid of them, it might be just records I've just never listened to ever, or maybe I'll put it on one more time and see if I really like it, but that hardly ever happens with me. Maybe to my detriment, actually. I live in a relatively small space, so the records are kind of overtaking things. As I mentioned, I have a computer collection, or did I mention that? I have an Apple computer collection. It was like 35 machines big. I've pared it down to 15 to 20 machines, some of the more important ones, largely because I needed room for records. And I may be getting rid of more of those computers to make even more room for records. So it's a concern. Record collecting can get out of hand. So that's what I've done. Get rid of things. There might be furniture I get rid of too, by the way, later. But getting rid of things to make room for the vinyl, yeah. Till there's no more room for vinyl. And then I don't know what to do. So we'll find out. So Krang's Henchman writes, "Gonna be in Burlington this October. What are the must-see spots? Food, coffee, records, weird stuff." Let's start with records, since this is a vinyl channel. There are 3 record stores in Burlington. One is Speaking Volumes. It's down the south end off Pine Street. I'm not a fan of that record store. I think they have a lot of junk. They're basically a glorified swap meet. Most of the records are in bad shape. Most of it's not music I'm interested in. They have almost no metal. So I kind of pass on that store. Of the other 2, there's Burlington Records and there's Pure Pop. Pure Pop is really good for new releases in metal. And the guy who runs that and stocks that knows what he's doing. So that's a really great place to go for that. The used stuff is so-so. In fact, I've never bought a used record there ever. Burlington Records, across the street or practically across the street, on College Street or near College Street, these 2 stores are. They're really good for used records. Their new selection of metal isn't all that great. A lot of it's hipster metal I don't listen to. I wonder really what they're thinking when they stock their new releases for metal in particular there. But their new arrivals, their used stuff, is usually really good. I find some gems there in the used bins. So that's my my view on that. There's also a record store outside of Burlington in the city of Winooski called Autumn Records. I've never been there. I've heard great things about it. One day maybe I'll do a record store report on it. Who knows? But that's it for record stores. Coffee, I don't drink coffee, so I can't really say, but a lot of people rave about Muddy Waters. They're on Main Street. You can check them out. Their decor looks a little bit kooky, so maybe that's an environment you dig. Food, I don't really eat out much at all, so I can't say, but if you go to Church Street, which is the main thoroughfare, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a restaurant on Church Street. Don't swing dead cats, by the way. But yeah, so that's the best I can do for that. Weird stuff. It depends on what you think is weird. One thing I always think is weird is coming on the highway, coming into Burlington from Williston, to the right before you get to the on-ramp to get into Burlington. There's this statue of sorts called Whale Tails, where it's basically 2 tails of whales, as in the animals, sticking out of the ground, like they were buried head first. And I don't know the history behind it. One day I'll check it out, but you're driving your car or riding in your car, depending, and you're passing these giant whale tails sticking out of the ground. They're kind of up on a hill to the side of the road, and it's a bit of an oddity. You should see it at least once. But that's all I really got. I'm sure there are other weird things. I have a number of friends in the Burlington area who watch my videos. Sometimes they come into the comments. If you can think of more weird stuff for this guy, put it in there. So that's what I've got. And that's it. Must-see spots. I don't know. If you're into clubs, you can probably go to Higher Ground. They have some interesting stuff. Or once in a while, they just reopened post-COVID, I think. So yeah, that's all I got. And Guz69 writes, "Oftentimes I see older metal guys like us praising records from the 80s, even though those bands have reformed over the years and put out albums with better quality and production. Is that magic from the 80s missing, or are they just overshadowed by the insane amount of releases nowadays? Is nostalgia a key factor for our preferences?" Nostalgia is a very strong factor. Yeah, I admit to some of it, but I also feel, and you've seen my videos, the number of you have, that I cover new releases, so I'm not gun shy about those. Some of this is going to tie into Liam's question again. Is the magic missing from the 80s in the later stuff? I don't know. I mean, you know, a lot of us idealize our teenage years and our metal discovery then. So I think we connect experiences to music. So there's that. We're having very different experiences in our 40s and 50s, for sure. So maybe that factors in. But nostalgia is a big deal, of course. I've often wondered, would I like an 80s band now at this age if I were to run into it for the first time? Sometimes I do. I've discovered 80s bands I didn't check out in the 80s, and I still love them. But again, I have to question myself, well, is that past nostalgia creeping in? So yeah, sometimes it is. And I try to keep it in check. I try to be open-minded. I try to listen to new bands, and I largely succeed at it. I love a lot of the new stuff that's out there. Again, as I've shown in my videos. So a lot of my older fans or older friends who are fans, again, I try to introduce them to things. I hope my videos do that, give them the permission they need to actually check out new bands and not be such grumpy old men. So yeah. Yeah, some of the newer releases from older bands, I did quite a few of those. I really liked Angel of Light from Angel Witch. I love that album. I just listened to it recently again, still love it. Some of the new Diamond Head's decent. I liked the re-record of Lightning to the Nations. I enjoyed that quite a bit. They modernized it. They did a good job with that. Not many bands do that when they revisit their older stuff. So yeah, hopefully that answered your questions. And yeah, that's what I got. So we're going to stop there. I'm going to go through a few notes I have here on my laptop. I am going to continue the questions in part 2. I'm looking to do part 2 in about 2 weeks. So we'll call that Thursday, July 29th, 2021. And I'll get to the rest of the questions because there were a lot more questions. I'd really like to get those answered. Let's see. At the end of that video, I'm going to talk about the live streaming in more detail, which seems very likely at this point. I really want to do live streaming pretty badly. If you haven't already done so, let me know in the comments if live streaming is of interest to you. It'll be a solo stream with me, but I'm going to put chat in as well. Would you watch that? Would you participate in the live chat? Definitely things like that. I do want to thank everyone who submitted questions to this Q&A, both this video and the upcoming one in 2 weeks. This definitely encouraged me to move more into the live streaming idea, so thank you much. If this is your first time on my channel, this is the Accusation Network. I do metal vinyl collecting videos once or twice a week. Check out the playlist, check out the videos in the playlist, which is the whole point of playlists, and all of that. I do all sorts of videos in and around metal vinyl collecting, whether it's vinyl hauls or upcoming metal vinyl releases or classic album reviews, all that stuff. Record store reports, also pretty cool, hoping to get back to those soon, and all of that. Of course, like, subscribe, and share. Those are 3 great ways to support this network. I always appreciate that. And that's it. Thank you for watching, and ever forward.